You guys ever heard the term fail faster?
Fail fast, fail often.
That's what this is really all about, right? I mean, you heard him say it a minute ago. We could build soft chips, and someone's sitting around going, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. I mean, part of what makes all this amazing is that those of us that innovate don't often see why it matters what we innovate. It's because we innovate something, you build it art for art's sake, and then you release it, and then people like you go out and find these amazing ways to use it. And so if you're always basically setting up the investment, setting up the idea of whether we should try it, based on what you think might come out of it, you're short selling the entire situation, right? I mean, if you look at things like what VMware did, much of what's seen as the big win of that today are not things we were even thinking about 10 years ago, right? So, you know, by essentially moving to a software model, what you're really saying is make it cheaper to fail faster, right? And it's not just a matter of failing faster, you have to make it very cheap to fail, right? Because it's through failure that we grow, it's through failure that we learn. And so one of this whole goals of this movement is to allow more companies and more people, you heard Kelly talk about, you heard it over and over again, competition's good, right? And so what a lot of this about is essentially make it cheaper and easier for a lot more people to innovate in crazy ways that can fail, that can fall on their face, but more importantly can get out into the public so that people like you guys can actually figure out why it matters, right? What is the real value of it once it actually gets out there? And so that's, to me, one of the real wins of all this is, it's all about failing faster. Now, with that said, and I'm sorry, that's not what I was planning on talking about, I got kind of into it. What I really wanted to do was just do two things, really, was just kind of recap what you saw a minute ago, which is the investment Brocade's making in a lot of open source and standards-based stuff. Just kind of touch on that a bit. There's been a real shift in the last couple years in that Brocade has really put a lot of effort. And the amount of headcount we're putting into open source projects, the involvement in standards groups, the involvement in IETF, the involvement in ONF and so forth. What I'd like to hear a little bit, just real quick, is does that matter to you guys as much as it used to matter to me? And do you think that is, going to get you the kind of results you want? I mean, you heard people talk about this NFV paper that came out 2 years ago. Part of what's happening here is that what's being asked for isn't always being answered as quickly. And so I'd like to hear just real quick is, do you guys still see, all of this integration as being as critical as we think it is? Anyone want to vote? I mean, do you believe that essentially it's right? I mean, are you guys excited about Open Daylight?
Yes.
Are you excited about ONF? Are you excited about these things? I mean,
I'm very bullish. I think there's only one. It's a Highlander situation. There'll only be one controller.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There can only be one. And Open Daylight ensures that there will only be one by having all southbounds, because it has a modular southbound. It encompasses all vendors, and it allows vendors to be lazy and just say, I'll use that controller because then I don't have to develop it, and it's free, right? I can't compete with free.
It's actually already the case, If you look, from the time I was inside Cisco, there is no Cisco product that doesn't contain open source software. None.
So, yeah, it's true. So in terms of objection handling, right, that means that everybody's going to focus down on ODL over time. It's going to take a while. It might be a year, 2, 5. Well, it's going to be whatever it is, and it's up to us as customers to demand vendors to drive it. So now if we accept that principle, then now I have a waste. So carving back to something that David Meyer said at the last field day, we talked about the waste.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that ultimately in biology and technology, there's always something in the middle that's immutable. There's something that's transcendent and can never be transmuted for something to another. And in our case, it's IP as a protocol, right? We have different types of layer 2, Ethernet, ATM, frame relay. We have different protocols above it, TCP, speedy, quick, but IP never changes. And I think in the terms of network operations, we're going to come down to ODL at the waste, like this, and there's going to be a bewildering array. And yesterday we saw people like Plexi talking about their dynamic bandwidth management functionality. We saw TailF talking about model configurations and using this model architecture to dynamically adapt the way that. Now, if you think about abstracting away and saying, here's ODL, here's a place for those people to live, and then down here's the actual network itself, and there's a common waste, there's a common choke point through which all all aspects can be not transmuted. There's a common that abstracts away the two layers and lets freedom to happen above and below. So yes, I'm pretty convinced that because of that consistency with a range of other technology models or environmental models and because the trick is that we've never really needed visibility in the network. We've always just gone, installed it, put the RIP tops on it, and walked away. I mean, I walked into a network just 6 months ago. They had 3,500 hosts in one VLAN with 3 subnets on top of it. Right? 3,500.
The professional services opportunity.
Yeah. So, it works, and it worked really well. They had layer 2 fabrics. They had, switches from a decade ago, and it all worked for them. There were some problems, but that was they accepted that. They knew there was a problem, then they finally fixed it. So it's possible to make these. They didn't have any visibility into the network, so they couldn't see what the problem was. What we lack in networking is visibility. We need to see what's happening in the network. We need to visualize. We need to see flows, like we saw from what was the middle present live action, and that was showing the cost profiles, and you could actually see the 20 different segments of a single link and see the flows in each of those 20 tunnels, and that's what we need to see. People don't. It takes an engineer 10 years to comprehend TCP streams as opposed to packets, because that's what we teach them. So how do we move from here to there? That's what we need. Is the visibility and the mobility. They're the 2 big things.
Oh, you gave part of the talk I didn't get to give. No, what it turns out is that same architecture that you just described is what makes evolvability and robustness possible in the same architecture, right? Because actually evolvability doesn't scale unless you have this.
Yep.
You asked the question if we're excited about this. I'm not in the code. I'm not even implementing as much as I was. That's for my team to do. I'm excited about this from building and scaling out new network structures, from the fact that I get out of the box. And my people aren't constrained by the standards of, a core distribution and an edge and then this WAN. That goes away. And whether it's Plexi, whether it's the stuff you guys are talking about today, it doesn't matter. These are all out-of-the-box ideas that things like ODL just continue to break down those walls and allow us to be incredibly flexible to serve our business and not have the network have to wrap itself around the network.
So there's technology for fun, and then there's useful stuff, right? So like one of the cool things we saw at Supercomputer this year was that last year it was all about 100 gig. Everyone was showing 100 gig. This year it wasn't about the fact that you could do 100 gig. It was about what you could do with 100 gig, right? That's why all this stuff's important, because yeah, it's great to define things, but what you want to do is get enough definitions in place that then we can go use it, right? And so now what you're seeing is we're now through that transition of having to go out and evangelize NFV, going out and having to evangelize things like OpenFlow and SDN and so forth, explain what it is and why you should do it, and now we're finally talking about what you can do with it. And so one of the things that I got a big kick out of this last weekend, I was in Taipei talking to a group of different customers, and the conversations over the last year have just changed so dramatically. This was all about plans. This was all about projects. This was all about schedules. This is all about what they're going to do with this stuff. It was no longer this, why should I do it, or, can I do it? It's what can I do with it? And so I would argue that that's the real value of all this. This is what allows the real innovation to happen, is we agree on some basics, so then you guys can go do some pretty amazing stuff, right?